Here's a good practical application of using present value. We have a business offer. You get to choose between a lump sum of $1 million or $100,000 every year for the next 16 years. Now, in this case, you have to look at it from both the buyer and seller's point of view. So rather than give you the decision where you're the seller, or I give you the choice where you're the buyer, we want to look at it from both points of view. Person A will be the buyer, person B is the seller, and this is just an offer. It doesn't mean that you have to take it. Now, the $1 million would be what the buyer would pay the seller. And the 100,000 every year for the next 16 years is what both of them understand that the business would generate. So right now, the business is producing $100,000 of, let's say, profit or money in your pocket. So you could either keep the $1 million in your pocket, or you could buy a business that puts $100,000 into your pocket every year for the next 16 years. And then presumably at the end of the 16 years, the business is worth nothing. If the business is going to have some salvage value at the end of those 16 years, then we'd have to add that to our calculation as well. But I didn't do that here. If you are the buyer or the seller, you think about it the same way. But what you think of as the rate of return might be different. Let's think that the seller assumes that there's a 9% rate of return they could get on that money. So they could either keep their business and get $100,000 a year for the next 16 years, or they could sell it right now for $1 million and take that $1 million and presumably put that in some place where it would return 9% a year for the next 16 years. So, and in that case, there certainly would be money left over at the end of the 16 years as well. But if we work it through there, then the seller is thinking, what would I rather have, $100 million or $100,000 a year for the next 16 years? So to figure out the present value from the seller's point of view, we use a 9% rate of return. And I do that over here. Now the 100,000 that they would collect right now from their business is worth 100,000, but the 100,000 that they would collect next year if they kept their business would only be worth $91,000 to them today. The present value for the next 16 years of each of those $100,000 that they expect to get, for instance, the 16 years from now, the $100,000 that they would receive would be worth 100,000 16 years from now, but today that's only worth $27,000 to them today. So if we added all of the 16 payments of 100,000 apiece, discounted by 9%, we would get a value of 906,000. In other words, from the seller's point of view, this business is only worth 906,000. So they would be willing to, I'm going to put in equals and click on that value right there. Since the seller thinks that the present value of this business is only 906,000, they would accept an offer of $1 million in order because $1 million is worth more to them than 906,000. So that's a great deal for the seller. How about from the buyer's point of view? Why, if the buyer is certainly not using a 9% rate of return, if they think that if they did the same calculation, and they certainly would, they would not pay $1 million for something that they value at only 906,000. So since they're offering $1 million, maybe they're using a 0% discount rate, that they think that there's nothing they can think of to do with the $1 million but just sit there and under their mattress or something. If it was a 0% rate of return, it would be better for them to get 16 payments of 100,000 each. That would be worth 1.6 million to them rather than $1 million. So it makes perfect sense for the buyer to pay. Here, I should make that green so it makes clear what who we're talking about here. The buyer thinks that if they used a 0% discount rate, that it's worth 1.6 million. It makes perfect sense to pay $1 million for $1.6 million. But they're probably not using a 0% interest rate. What interest rate do you think they are using? And for that, we'll change the interest rate to something that is less than 9, maybe 7%. If they think the best thing they can do right now, their best alternative of their money is 7%, or they currently have it in some sort of bond or something like that that's earning like 5.5% or something like that. Well, in that case, then we've got a situation where where we now discount it by that. And in order to do that, we're putting in no matter what the discount rate is, the present value of 100,000 paid out now is always going to be 100,000, but the present value of this is going to be what is here divided by 1 plus that, and we have to put that into parentheses so that we get a proper calculation. And we'll see that that's been now reduced by some amount. The present value at 6% of that $100,000 a year from now is $94,000, where it's only worth $91,000 to a person using a 9% discount rate is worth more to a person using a 6% rate. This might explain why the seller was willing to sell and the buyer was willing to buy. Now, if we continue through with that particular part of the calculation with the parentheses copy, and we put that in place of each one of those, then we will get values that are correcting for each one of these pieces. And you can see as I do this that the present value, is considering the fact that it's a 6% rate of return and making the adjustments accordingly. Yeah, I will stop it. I'd stop. Go ahead, answer.